Next, please. Okay, so this, I'm just using this slide to set the stage a little bit to show you the great advantage that the barber pole worm has. And this is what we're combating. Each worm will lay 5,000 to 10,000 eggs per day. Just kind of consider that, okay? Every day. Okay, that she's out on there on that pasture. So, in one ewe, there's basically 200 grams of feces per day that's produced. And it's about 4 pounds. And if you multiply the 1,800 grams by the 200, the 200 eggs per gram, that gives you 360,000 eggs per day that you can put out on your pasture. If you have 100 ewes, 36 million eggs per day. So you get the idea. These guys are egg-laying machines. And that is what we're up against. Fortunately, very fortunately, a lot of these eggs die. All right, so how do we get them? I think the simplest answer is just say they are there, and somehow they got there. But more specifically, you can buy parasites, right? You know, you got that ewe that you go see, or that ram, and boy, that's a humdinger, and it's the best ewe you've seen in your life, and you think, man, I want that genetics. But what we often forget about is what the parasite history in that ewe is. She might be loaded with parasites. Even if she's not showing physical signs, she can be really adept at being resilient to the parasites. Okay? So, we can buy them. We can also get them on that really good deal for lease pasture that we lease, that somebody last year grazed with sheep that had a lot of parasites. So there's 2 ways we can get them that way. Also, which is really important, is not only do we buy the worm, we buy the management of that worm in previous years. So if I buy from Marie, who tells me that she's never had parasites in her life, but she's a devious soul, and she deworms them every week, okay? So I bought Marie's ewes who have been dewormed, or not every week, every month for the last 10 years. I'm buying her worming protocol, right? Okay, so not only are we buying worms, we're buying the dewormer protocol that has been used on those worms, which is really key, because I've talked to sheep producers that have said, I don't know where I got all these worms, and I don't know why my dewormer doesn't work anymore. But I bought 200 ewes 2 years ago to add to my flock, and in all probability, that's where the worms came from, and that's where the dewormer resistance came from. Okay, so it's a hard concept to kind of get in our minds, because we're not used to thinking that, but it's very true. Okay, thanks. Oh, I should have said too, if you're on dry land pasture, you're probably never going to have problems. Okay.
Hey Dave.
Yeah.
When you say irrigated pasture, does it matter if it's irrigated with well water versus stream water or irrigation ditch water? Is there a difference, or is it just wet?
Good question. It's just wet.
Okay.
Yeah. Is resistance versus resilience. And we talked a little bit about this already, but resistance is the ability of the host to resist infection in the first place. And there's probably a couple ways to do it, but the research is kind of vague on it. Some sheep just don't let that barber pole worm latch on to the epithelial linings. Okay? Now, after they're infected and they don't show physical signs, that's resilience. Okay? So those 2 terms we kind of got to get straight in our minds and go through. It took me 5 or 6 times of hashing it through to get the concepts down, because they're important, because fecal egg counting, which we're going to demonstrate over there, that shows how many eggs that a particular ewe is depositing in her feces. It has nothing to do with how her body is able to react to the infection, right? It's just the infection. So fecal egg counts are an indication. They tell you the degree of infection. But FAMACHA scoring, you're actually scoring a physical appearance that tells you how that animal is infected, how she's reacting to it. Okay? So FAMACHA is indicating resilience plus resistance. They got the infection, and it's also measuring how they react to the infection. Whereas fecal egg counts are just saying, giving you an indication of the infection. Okay, next please. All right, so we've set up a station there. Unfortunately, Sharon, the manure I picked up doesn't have any eggs in it, but we're gonna show what they
I'm
would.
sure I do.
Yeah. Okay. This fecal egg count. All you're doing is you're looking at a microscope at about 100 power, and you can see these little eggs. And it's called a McMaster's Flotation Assay, and you put them on a special slide, the McMaster's slide, and the slide has grids in it, 2 grids, and you just focus on an air bubble, and what the McMaster's solution does when you add it to the fecal material, it causes the eggs to float up. But if you consider how much these things, if you're having problems, a microscope really gives you an advantage.
$20 a fecal to take it.
Right, it's $20 to $25 to have your vet do a fecal egg count. So you can pay for a microscope really fast. The other thing that you can do with a microscope and fecal egg counts is you can deworm your sheep, wait 10 days later and take another fecal sample from the same sheep and then count eggs again, and that tells you how well your dewormer's working, right? If you got the same amount of eggs that you did before you dewormed, you go, uh-oh, this dewormer no longer works for me. That's called a fecal egg count reduction test, okay? And you can have your vet do it for you. He'll do it or she will do it. And so that's a really big thing that fecal egg counts are used for. They're also used for, NSIP is a national sheep testing program, and they're trying to improve genetics and with various categories that are important to sheep and producers, like number of live lambs born, maternal weaning weights. There's 2 breeds now, Katahdins and Polypays, that have, they're taking data for parasite resistance, and they're having their producers take fecal egg counts at a certain time, and then that information is put into the national database, and they plunk out a genetic parameter you can use. And so it's really cool because we can use the sire has a tremendous influence on our flocks. I don't want to cut down the ladies any, but the sire is several times more important genetically than the ewe in terms of the whole flock's genetics. Okay. All right, and the other thing is they use that in the drench-right assay test, and the drench-right assay test was developed by the University of Georgia, and basically what it tells you is in one quick thing, which dewormer works on your flock and which doesn't. So this drench-right test costs $450 for producers, which seems like a lot of money, but think of the time you're saving by going out and doing fecal egg count reduction tests for all 3 different classes of dewormers. It's a pretty cheap bargain. They're very good at it, and they tell you when you just have to collect the sample a certain way, send it to them overnight, and they will tell you what dewormer works for your flock and which doesn't. Okay, so those are the things that the fecal egg count assay work, what they're involved in, and how they're used. There's a tip sheet I gave you in your packet. It tells much more about fecal egg counts, and we'll go from there. Okay, so we're gonna, just a second, we're gonna traipse over there to that microscope, and even though it doesn't have a barber pole worm egg in it, this is what we're gonna see. This is under 100 pound, or 100 magnification. We use these air bubbles. There's gonna be some air bubbles in there, and we focus on the air bubble, because the air bubble is right on, is floated up, right? And that's where our eggs are. So, and this is what we're gonna see. This is Homunculus contortus, or the barber pole worm. And basically, there's probably going to be other worms' eggs in there too. There are other strong growls or roundworm eggs. But mostly they're going to be barber pole worms. So when we count, we're just going to count all the eggs that look like this. And we're going to be, for farmers, close enough. Okay? The other egg in there that you're going to see, it's not an egg, it's a protozoa cell. And that's coccidia. It's off the page here. But see the difference in size between a barber pole worm egg and a coccidia protozoa? And that's what we key on, is the size. So these are about a quarter of the size of a barber pole egg. And so we just count the ones that are this big. And we don't worry about the coccidia in our barber pole worm count, okay? But it's really cool because if we have all kinds of coccidia in here, you know, this guy, and say there's 10 more in here, and you come up with a count of like 70 in the whole slide, and you multiply by 50, because that's your dilution rate, you've got a lot of coccidia, which kind of should send up red flags to you that you better start doing something about coccidia or else somebody's going to tip over. Okay? Yeah. So that's another good use of the fecal egg count.
So at what point, like how many eggs should you be concerned? Like any? Or?
Yeah, there's two numbers you got to worry about. One is 500 eggs per gram.
Okay.
Okay, if you don't have 500 eggs per gram, all the genetic selection that you're trying to use, it's meaningless because you don't have enough challenge. They call it challenge.
Okay.
So if you don't have 500 eggs per gram, you don't have enough parasites, barber pole worms in there to even worry about.
Okay.
So if you're up around 1,000, that's probably normal eggs per gram. If you're up around 2,000 eggs per gram, you got starting to get problems. If you're up to 3, 4, 5, 6, 10,000 eggs per gram, definitely got a problem. And what you can do is you can run your sheep through a race, and with a gloved hand, just pull out the pool from the rectum. Lambs, you got to be a little more careful, but a full-grown sheep, you're not going to hurt them a bit. Just lube up and with your finger, just pull out a poo. And 2 grams is the same as 2 milliliters. So you just take, you can weigh it if you want to, but the easy farmer way to do it is just to get a 12 cc syringe, cut the end of it off, and stuff in 2 cc's. And then plunge it out, and that's your sample. The main thing I wanted to show you with the microscope is try to encourage you to do it. You know, to get a microscope and do it, because you have lots of power when you got a microscope. You can save yourself a lot of money. You can see if it's a cocci problem or if it's a barber pole worm. Yeah. And you know, there are 2 different management strategies. If you're losing sheep, it might be from cocci too. And you can tell with the microscope. The other thing is FOMACHA score. Cocci don't cause anemia. Barber pole